All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Deja and Nate Keppler. To tell you a little bit about them, Nathan has been in insurance for the last 8 years, being involved in farm, commercial, and crop insurance before starting his Allstate agency here in Des Moines, helping insure businesses on a daily basis. Nathan knows what details matter, protecting all of your assets. And Deja has over 15 years of service industry experience on the West and East Coast, and recently started her own business a year ago here in the Midwest, Savor the Rise. With having to insure her own business, she's very fluent in what needs to be properly covered. And I'm fortunate to call Deja a friend. She has helped me out many times. She answers all of my text messages. She's even brought me a mixer when mine broke. So I'm excited to see them speak today. For those of you who just joined us, they dropped a little document into the chat that you can download that's going to kind of go over what they're going to talk about today. So if you want to have that in front of you, you can. Otherwise, I think they're going to share their screen to go over it. But with that, I'm going to let you all take it away. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. So insurance is extremely boring, as we all know, but it's something that everybody needs, especially when, shit hits the fan, quite literally, with your business. It's one of those things you always want to make sure that you have proper coverage so you're not, tanking your profits, especially with home baking. I'm sure you all know, like, your refrigerator takes a dump and then it's like, whoa, what am I doing now? So I guess what we're going to do is I'm going to screen share with you so you're able to see if I know what I'm doing. Bear with me.
Sure, that Word document, the outline.
There we go. Is that working?
That's the coverage out.
Oh,
There you go.
this one?
Yep.
Is it sharing or? Sorry, I'm not the best with this. Bear with me one moment. Is it this one?
I don't know. Well, I think they have it in front of them. I think she shared it with all of them. They can follow along if they need. So it's just basically an outline of, and you might have one already. It's called a BOP. That's a similar, acronym in the insurance world we all talk about, but it stands for business owner policy. And there's the basics of a policy, just like there's a basics to your car insurance, to your home insurance. There's basics to a business policy, and that's going to be the first three items. There's a liability, of course, the business personal properties, and then the buildings, if we want to just sum it up really simply. And then there's obviously some other extras that I'm going to go over why they're important and why when it comes claim time, and that's really why you buy insurance, right? I always tell my clients is that you're buying this policy so you have a claim. If you have a claim tomorrow, it works. And so with that being said, liability, that's I think for the home bakeries, like Deja and I've talked, she was required to have just an insurance policy for, I think it was Valley Junction Farmers Market.
Just for doing insurance.
Yeah.
Just for doing the farmers markets, they always want you covered a certain way.
Yeah. And there's usually a minimum premium around $300, no matter what company you're going through, for $1 million in liability. And that's going to give you products liability. Obviously, they're your products. Products is the same whether you're making widgets or you're making bread or you're making, that's the product you're making. As well as there's a liability for why the course of business, somebody gets hurt, tries suing you. If you malign somebody's reputation and they try suing you, that's all part of your liability protection. Obviously, if you've got, it gets to be a little more murkier when you have a business side of your home, because and like I used to do a lot of farm insurance, and that was always, the farm policies are very different because it's hard to tell where the farm stops and the personal begins. And that's the same thing with if you have a home bakery, where does the bakery stop and where does the personal begin? And so policies now, they compensate for that. They have realized that at home, your oven that you're using is the same as really your personal oven that's going to be covered in your home insurance. Or depending on the company, you might have to use your commercial policy, because if some companies want to be particular, if you have a fire and it was caused by you in the course of baking bread for your business, well, depending on the company, they're going to might give you a hard time about not wanting to cover it because it was business use, not personal. Some of that's going to come down to gross receipts, how big your business is, because obviously most home policies account for certain incidental businesses run out of your home. So you don't have to be, as well as then some of the major ones that I guess that I would look for, especially when it comes to liability, that can be a little gap, is named insured and who else needs to be listed as named insured. So the biggest one I would look for is who's the policy written to. So if you have a business name but the policy is just in your name, make sure the business is listed there as well. Because if there's a lawsuit and let's say Deja Keppler's listed, but she operates under Save the Rise, and Save the Rise isn't listed as a named insured, Save the Rise has no access to that policy, to those policy limits. And so therefore, or vice versa, if it's just Save the Rise is listed and not Deja, could get sued and the policy is not going to respond because she's not listed. That's just a common, it's not like a big deal, but it's just one you want to watch out for. If you have a good agent, they're going to go take the time to, who all needs to be protected under this, because you have access. It's not a big deal to list list all the entities that need access to the liability insurance. Any questions on liability real quick?
Can you just repeat what you just said? Because I think it's really important for everybody to hear again, if you don't mind.
Sure.
About
So when
who needs to be listed on the policy.
Yeah. So you pay attention to who's listed as named insureds on the policy.
you want to make sure you are on there as well as your actual company name that you're doing business as.
Exactly. Because if it's just the company name, for instance, with Deja with Save the Rise, but she's not listed on there, and somebody tries suing her for, it's not going to respond because it's just like another entity or another person.
Meaning
Save
it's
the
not going
Rise.
to cover properly without both of the
Exactly.
names being on there.
Both the names being on there. And so that just gives you extra, so there's no no gray area there. I'd have yourself personally listed as well as your business. So that way you have access to those liability limits in a lawsuit. We don't run into as much as Iowa, but when we were in New York State, that was always a big, it's more of a, what's it called? Sue happy area where you really wanted to make sure you had everyone listed. So that way they didn't try suing one entity and not the other. And like I said, it's not going to cost you anymore. So you might as well have everybody listed. Any questions? Okay. The next part, the business personal property. So this one is, let's see here. And I know from doing Deja, when I was watching Deja's business grow, a lot of times, and I ask customers this, how much property do you have? And you might not have, a lot of the policies are going to put a minimum of $10,000 on for, that would be your ovens, that would be all your mixing equipment, everything that's used in the course of the business is going to be covered under there. And so a lot of policies are going to have a minimum of 10,000. But as you grow, you want to, and I know this from dealing with different commercial businesses, that number grows as time goes on. You add more equipment, and that's why you want to talk to an agent, have a good relationship, so you keep that up to date. Somebody that checks in with her, you check in with them, because that could let's say you install a brand new oven and you didn't tell your insurance agent about it, and then the fire happened, so it's not on the policy, it wasn't updated. So it's very important. When you used to do a lot of farm insurance, farmers are trading tractors, combines all the time, and we always were checking in with them every 6 months just to see, hey, did you buy anything? Did anything change? And that's a critical thing when looking for a company and an agent, that your commercial policy really needs to be a relationship with you and your agent to make sure it's up to date at all times. Because if it's not, there's just no going back and adding it after the fact.
Right. So to just reiterate, if you guys are making notes, every time you have a new piece of equipment or anything like that, just make sure that you are updating it on the insurance policy in case anything does go wrong there.
Yeah. And for like Deja, we've got equipment at 2 different locations. We make sure we have each location listed and how much properties at each one.
Right. Or like, even if you store something somewhere, if you're using, I believe a shared kitchen space, you want to, like list what you have at each location. That way it is properly covered. And I believe they can split we can split the coverage amount
Yeah,
between the
yeah,
two. So
we've
you can
got
have a
different
certain
levels at
set
each,
amount at
yeah.
each location as well.
As well as back to the locations, your liability coverage is going to follow you at those locations as well.
That's
That's why
right.
it's also important.
Including farmers markets and things like that.
Yeah. Well, there's
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
And then any questions on building? And then the other thing I'll point to, and I'll get into that here when I talk about packages. And I know with Deja's business in the summertime with farmers markets, we got a lot more supplies on hand. And so there's a 25% rider on hers that seasonally increases her business personal property automatically. Because in the wintertime, we don't have as much flour and everything else because we're not doing as many markets. And so that's just that's a coverage to look for. A lot of these, I'll get into the packages and why you go with a lot of these other higher end companies and go with these enhanced packages because they're already automatically part of it. You don't have to ask for it, but it's and there's some, and like I said, I've been through a lot of claims, and so I always look at it and I tell my clients, I'm not trying to load you up on a lot of insurance. I'm just giving you I just want to imagine what's a claim going to look like and how do we protect it, or at least know what the risks are that you can self-insure.
Right. And then we just had a question come in from Holly. It says, does equipment include all your home kitchen items, home oven, fridge, things that are standard in a home?
So this one's going to be, and like I said, if it's your homeowner's policy is going to have some exclusions if you're using it's going to be and it's going to come down to a threshold on usually gross receipts of how much business you are doing out of the home where they're not going to cover it anymore. But if it's under that, it's going to be, if your home oven, your home refrigerator, it's going to be covered under your homeowner's policy. So it's not till you like for instance, if you have like a commercial oven or something, a great example would be if you have, and Deja and I have talked about this, if we build a garage at our house and we put all of her and buy a commercial oven and get that in there, that would not be covered. Just like a mechanic that's doing mechanic work outside of his home and his garage isn't covered under his homeowners anymore. It's considered a commercial building at that point or commercial property. And so his tools and everything aren't covered anymore on the homeowners. It'd be similar to bakery as well. Your utensils and everything. If it gets to be outside of that threshold, and like I said, it's specific to each insurance company. Allstate, I think I'd have to look at it, to be honest with you. But that's where it's going to be the determining factor is how much business gross receipts you're doing out of your home.
Any other questions before we jump on to buildings?
Okay. Then that feeds into what we were just talking about. So if you rent, own, or if it's an in-home bakery, we've covered that. I mean, and that's a part of the policy. If you grow and you get a storefront or buy a building, then it's going to be part of it. You won't have to get another policy. It's just an extra coverage on your business owner package already. And you're going to want to insure it for replacement costs of the building or actual cash value if it's older, what you paid for it, those things of that nature. If you're leasing the building, most of these policies anymore provide coverage for damage to premises leased already in the package, so you don't have to like add it on. But you want to make sure, and your landlord is going to want to have that, know that it's on there as well. So that's how that gets covered. So if there's a fire caused by an oven to a rented building, that your policy is going to pay for it. So and like I said, back to if you're doing business out of your kitchen home, like I think a lot of Deja mentioned, everyone is, it's going to fall under your homeowners unless you're doing more, or if you do have a commercial policy, it's going to, the claims process is going to figure out what part of it's personal and what part of it's commercial. So, and like I said, it gets to be, it's not as cut and dry, but as, like I said, because of my experience in farm insurance, anybody's lived on a farm, most of the time your house is next to your farm and you can't separate, where the farming stops and where the personal begins. And it's probably very true.
Very
Most
true.
of you can appreciate that with your bakery. You're cooking dinner as well as you're making bread for sale. It's all mixed together. So.
I guess we'll go into extra expense now, which is kind of important, I would definitely say.
So extra expense is always something I used to put on policies just automatically, because, and here's why, and I got a great story to go with it. And forgive me for not telling more stories, because insurance gets to be pretty dry. But we used to do a lot of, we lived in an area with a lot of apple orchards, and we used to insure cold storages. And there was one cold storage that the nitrogen scrubbers went out on it. And these are really large storage areas. I mean, I don't know how many millions of bushels they had, but so the refrigerant went out, these nitrogen scrubbers. The only place that they had these was in England. And this was back. So this was my boss dealt with this, because this was back when the Concorde was flying. I don't know if anybody remembers the Concorde could go across the Atlantic in a couple hours, or I don't know. I'm probably wrong on that. But anyway, we used that extra expense coverage on the policy, and that's used to expedite the claim. And so in this instance, they actually paid for tickets to fly those nitrogen scrubbers from London, England to Western New York to get those refrigerators up and running on that cold storage, and used extra expense coverage to pay for it. So that's an extreme example, but
very extreme.
But let's say you had a big event that you were going to do, right? And let's say something happened to your facility. You could use extra expense to go rent something real fast to still do it, or to go ship in a special, I don't know, what would be an oven, or what some sort of equipment that you needed that broke or was damaged in a claim, and that it paid for that extra money was used to expedite it and get it there faster. It's kind of like the grease on a wheel. It really makes it go a lot smoother. And the great part about it, it doesn't cost a lot of money. It's really cheap. And so it's like, why not throw it in there? And that's where, like with all my clients, I tend to, because I'm frugal by nature, so I don't like to spend other people's money. But there's some coverages that are so cheap that it's like, why not do it? Because it's going to make such a difference if you do have a claim. Because I've seen it done. I mean, we've used extra expense for paying for, I had a guy's baling hay, his baler burned up. And we used it to pay somebody else to come in and bale all his hay. And if you know anything about making hay, it's like making bread. The timing is critical. And so if you miss, it gets rained on, it's ruined. So it's like, and he asked me, he's like, why was it on there? I was like, Alan, I just threw it on there for it because I knew you're going to need it. He's like, well, thank you very much. I'm like, well, that's what a good agent does. I mean, a lot of times you're not going to understand all these coverages. I'd like to explain them to my clients, but I know at the end of the day, you're not going to remember like this presentation or what, if I sold you a policy, everything, but you wanted to know somebody you trust that understands your business. And like I said, that maybe is a little too pessimistic because they're always thinking that you're going to have a claim, but that's our job as insurance agents.
Any questions on that before we go to the next segment? Okay. So we'll talk about equipment breakdown now, which I know can be very troublesome, especially, if you're using just your oven at home, it can be definitely detrimental to, what you're going to accomplish for the week. Do you want to go into that or?
So the biggest one that's most applicable to like restaurants, bakeries is like a power surge that knocks out refrigeration in the middle of the night and like ruins how much produce you have in there. Deja and I've had that. We've had that happen a couple times with the breaker here. Then we've had to throw everything out, and which that wouldn't have been covered because that wasn't. That's not a covered peril under the equipment breakdown, but that's the one that's most applicable. If there's some sort of mechanical breakdown, if a compressor goes out, that would be covered under it. And so that way it allows for some coverage for spoilage. I think Deja's policy, we have that written with the Hartford, and there's coverage there for spoilage and other things that obviously that's going to happen with a refrigeration unit going out. You're going to lose a lot of produce. So depending how large you are, your deductible might be larger than the amount that's lost. I think Deja, both times that's happened to us, that wouldn't have surpassed our deductible, but that's just an important coverage that, and also, like I said, and I'll go into her package here in a little bit, because I'll show you how you don't have to worry about, you don't have to worry about adding and subtracting all these coverages. Most of these companies, like we have her written with a Hartford, and then because Allstate allows me to broker out commercial business. And so I can write business with Travelers, Hartford, Nationwide, and then Allstate, we do some business as well. And any of the top tier companies, they have these enhanced packages that already include this stuff, these extra, what I call them bells and whistles. Besides the you can get a basic policy through online or something like that that's cheaper, that's going to have your liability, your personal property protection, but it's not going to have these extra expense, equipment breakdown. It might not have any of those, or you have to add them on separately.
Which will probably make them end up being the same price that it would have been, dealing with somebody local in the first place. So it would have been around noon. I sent you guys another document since I have no idea how to screen share. Definitely not my specialty, but basically I just emailed you guys. It should be about 5 pages long. It's just a deck page is what we call it in insurance. And it just kind of goes over like the different limits and things like that. And the reason we sent it to you is that way, when you do have your own insurance, you're kind of able to navigate through a deck page and really understand what it's saying. So we'll go through that with you as if it was kind of like your own policy, just so you kind of have a good idea of how that works. Before we do start with that, is there any other questions at all currently? Okay. So we'll just start. Was everybody able to find the deck page? Okay.
Yeah. And so, and we won't go through all this because
Thanks, Chelsea.
Yeah, this is for her policy. It's called the stretch blanket limit or the stretch endorsement. And I think Liberty Mutual has, when I do a lot of quotes, Liberty Mutual has, they usually give me a bare bones quote, and then they give me their enhanced quote. And I usually encourage clients to use the enhanced, or like this one's the stretch, because you'll notice if you look through here, there are so many different coverages and they're part of the package. So we're not going to piecemeal it, take some off, put some on. We're just going to, because the price is the same no matter what you do, with all these included. So like business income expense, there's spoilage, computers, backups of sewer and water, arson, fraud, there's stuff for fraud, salesperson samples, signage, transit business income.
We might as well just call it like the Murphy's Law package, because I feel like almost everything you could think of going wrong is kind of on there.
And like, I'm a big value person. I look at the dollar value for her, the difference between her policy with and without. It was just it's, in my opinion, it's worth it. Is it, from what I see? I mean, you could get it, and I know I don't want to spend someone else's money, but it really, when you look at all these coverages, and if you never have a claim, it's never going to matter, right? But if you do, there's going to be some of these that you're never going to think about. And for instance, so that's the biggest thing, I guess, the takeaway for me, if when you're looking at a policy, look at what the enhanced package is. Even in your home and auto insurance, they seem to be the best value for your dollar. And like when it comes to claim time, they're the ones that make it smoother to have a claim. And so, but some of these you'll be like, well, why do I need these? Some of these aren't even applicable. Fine arts coverage of $10,000. Let's see here, fire extinguisher recharge. But like I said, they're just all on there because they're part of the package. And a lot of these companies have gone to, and the good ones, that's what they've done. They're higher quality companies, I guess. And so they have higher quality coverages, just like when you guys are making higher quality, and you probably resonates with anybody on here, you guys are making a higher quality product as well, right? You're using higher quality flour, using higher quality ingredients for that higher quality end product. Same thing in insurance. And I'm pretty a proponent about that, telling people, because I even tell them, hey, Nationwide's a really good company. State Farm does a good job. Allstate does a good job too. Stick with those higher quality companies, and you're going to get a better bang for your dollar, as well as find an agent that cares and knows what he's doing, or she. And that's really one of the things, because you're not going to remember all this stuff, or nor do you need to. You're more important. Your job is obviously to master baking, but you need to. These are some of the things that you could ask about, at least to differentiate someone that knows what they're talking about, or somebody that just wants to sell you the cheapest policy just to get you in the door.
Any other questions at all?
Don't feel bad. I never get
Yeah.
questions on insurance, so I'm not surprised.
I can ask a few.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you're going to cover them yet, but I always get asked about car insurance. So delivering a product, they're in an accident versus their car under personal use. Can you guys touch on that for a little bit?
Yeah, great question. So that's really going to depend on, like I said, how much business you're doing. And so for instance, like, because Deja uses her personal car to deliver some baked goods at certain times. It's and I'd have to be honest with you, I should have looked up what Allstate's threshold is, but a lot of companies, or you can put on that it's used for business use on your own personal policy, and it will provide coverage there.
Yeah.
So there's forgive me, I can't recall the limit off the top of my head, but there is a portion there where you're going to need to start buying a commercial policy or a commercial auto policy if you get over a certain threshold of business.
Similar to just like when we were talking about like the home policy is just having like a certain limit towards, being covered, and then you're not. So it really does vary based off of what kind of
the company that
yeah.
you have your home and auto insurance with. Each has their own parameters, but that's usually where that's the differentiator when you need to move over to a commercial policy versus you can still use your personal auto policy.
Right. And then we just had another question come in too. Do you need to be a licensed bakery to get insurance?
So no, the when I do any quotes, they never ask me for a license number for bakeries at all. Some different forms of business, we need to provide that, like contractors and things like that. We need their license number to get insurance quote, but bakeries, they don't ask for that.
Okay. And then another question we saw in Iowa, can we have our name of our business on our car and be covered under our personal insurance?
So if it's registered to your business, you need to have a commercial insurance policy. So if it's titled to your business.
So if the car is
It's all about who's titled
the,
to.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it's owned by a different person. So then you're gonna need a business auto. At least with Allstate. I don't think the other ones do either though, but yeah.
I'm going to ask a question because it came up when we were talking with the state. One of our listeners today is going to have the road shut down in front of her house. So she will be completely out of business because under her licensing agreement, she has to be picked up at her home. What does that look like for her? Would business interruption or that extension policy cover her? Or is there anything that will cover her if she gets shut down from the road closure?
I'm not aware of anything. The business income I don't believe would extend to that because there's not a covered peril that's happening there. You know what I mean? There's not like a windstorm or there's not a fire. There's nothing that happened to cause that for it to respond to. So I don't think, and I don't know of any other, I don't know, there might be, but I don't know of any coverage I've ever heard of that would provide for that just because of the road closure. It's just for construction, I take it, obviously, right?
Yeah, it is. Will you touch just a little bit more on business interruption insurance and what that is?
So that, let's see where Deja's limits are, so I can talk to it. Business interruption is, so if there's a name, like I said, if there's a named peril that happens. So if there's a fire, there's a windstorm, a tornado, that's the only time business interruption is going to respond. And that's, where is it here? Hers is, sorry, I got my papers out on whack here. Was it 10,000? It's for a period. Most policies, it's for a set period of time. There's usually a waiting period as well. I think it's 24, 48 hours. And then after that, it is, where is the business interruption coverage? And so, and as well as they're going to need to know that obviously they're not going to pay out just the 10,000. They're going to want to see that.
Oh, is this it right here?
They're going to want to see that this was actually income that you normally were taking in. Forgive me here. Oh, here it is. Back up. Okay.
On page 4 of the document we sent you. Right.
Yeah, business income and extra expense, extended income for 60 days, actual loss sustained. So they're going to actually see your records that this was actually income that you were planning on getting. And I guess there is no waiting period on Deja's policy with with her business income. Yeah, well, some companies I know they've got like a 24 or 48-hour waiting period before they start paying. So that first 24 or 48 hours of business, you're just lost. You're not going to compensate for. But let's say there was a fire and she was out, so it would pay up to 60 days of what she'd actually like. They'd go through her last year's gross receipts or what she had orders for or what she had planned on been doing, and they would actually pay the actual loss sustained in her policy for up to 60 days.
For the person who has the road coverage though, would she then go, I guess, after like the city of Des Moines as far as like lost income, or how does that work?
I have no idea. That's outside
Yeah.
my scope.
Okay.
As I say,
I'm curious about it too. That's, very interesting. I would never, think about that. We did have another question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's no coverage. So even though your road shuts down, I've experienced this 5 times in 3 years, you're just out. There's no coverage and the city will not pay out.
It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of, yeah.
So we did have one other question. I think we must have misunderstood. So I can't have my name on my vehicle unless the insurance is under my company name. I don't deliver, etc. So Lori, are you talking about just like putting like a sticker on your vehicle?
Or is it title into the business name?
So okay.
okay,
So a
yes.
sticker. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be totally fine.
Oh yeah.
wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I just have them rated for business use on your policy. And then you can have a sticker on there. If it's named, the vehicle's titled in your personal name, that's always the biggest differentiator. It's who's it titled to.
There's a lot of people on this call who are just starting their businesses. So can you maybe touch on like, do they even need to be insured if they're just going to sell out of their home? If they're not planning on doing any markets, do you recommend still carrying a liability policy? Because of the way that the home license works, if they're falling under that specific cottage law, they're not doing any deliveries, they're not doing any wholesale. I mean, like the answer is really yes, but like what type of policy would you suggest for that person who maybe isn't going to do a pop-up? And then is it they grow and expand, what type of policy should they look into for farmers market? I mean, most farmers markets are going to require you to have a liability policy, but what do you recommend as they kind of like advance and scale their business and then add on vehicles? I think you've touched on that, but there's a lot of people on here who are just in the beginning stages or
Okay.
want to start their business. So what does a very basic policy look like for them? And then for people who are having people come to their homes and pick up items, like what does the risk look like? And what should they make sure to have covered under that liability or homeowners insurance for the people that are coming, especially in like the winter in Iowa, if people are coming to pick up and there's snow and, what do they need to make sure that they have coverage, so they're protected for if people come to their homes?
Sure. That's a great question. And so there's a couple ways that you could do it. So the minimum premium that I found with my carriers is right around $300 for the year for a CGL, a commercial general liability policy, and that's because if your gross receipts fall under, they're just going to give you the minimum premium of $300. So that is going to provide coverage for any liability exposures for you doing business out of your home in-home bakery. And that's the same one that's going to be required at the farmers markets. That'll and the nice thing about a commercial general liability policy versus all other types of insurance is it's auditable, which means I'm gonna expand a little bit here and then I'll come back. Let's say you're doing bakery, but you're also selling, let's say, some greeting cards or some earrings out of your house too. Those are two different types of businesses. And there's going to be in the way a CGL works, they're going to rate it off of gross receipts and they're generally gross receipts, but there's going to be a coverage for each class code for each one of those types of businesses. So let's say you're doing, let's say we're doing the bakery. Let's say you're doing some jewelry out of your house. Heck, let's say you're repairing tires also. It's going to be that same CGL policy with just 3 different class codes for each type of business that you're doing. And the other nice thing is let's say you didn't tell the company, then you just picked up repairing tires and somebody came over and tire blew out and hurt someone. Well, they're going to cover that still. They're just going to come back on you and charge you the premium they should have been charging. That's the difference between a commercial general liability policy. It's auditable, as well as, and I know when you're starting out, that's very far in the future, but that's where you're going to start. Is this a minimum CGL policy for $300? Now, the other way to do it is depending on your homeowner's insurance, there is some coverages we can put on there for limited business pursuits. As long as, like I said, if you're not doing a lot of dollar volume out of your house, it's probably the most economical way to provide some liability coverage. I think Allstate, it's like $1,500 a year in gross receipts that we can put that endorsement on there. And I think it costs, don't quote me on this, I'm just ballparking, like $32 or
For the year.
for the year.
Yeah.
It's very,
Like-
and so that way there's a way to, if you're not really large yet, you're just starting, it gives you just some coverage that something happened. Like I say, somebody came over to pick up a loaf of bread and they twisted their ankle on your sidewalk. And that way your homeowner's policy is not going to have a problem covering it versus because it was technically some sort of business you're trying to do out of your house.
And that goes into renter insurance as well, doesn't it? If you're renting a house, aren't you covered?
That's a good question. I don't think we ran into that with renters
Okay.
before. I haven't even looked, I'm sure it is, but I haven't even looked at it before.
All these gray areas. We have a couple other questions coming in. Somebody asked, are any of you here using a shared kitchen space that you're renting by hour/day, etc.? If so, recommendations.
So they're asking us that, or they're asking,
Maybe everyone.
asking everyone. If you're renting a shared space, I'd get just a commercial general liability policy, just liability only, just to cover you at that your business pursuits there. Your homeowner's not going to extend to that place at all.
There are a lot of people on this call that use shared kitchen spaces, but I'm not
Is there?
sure what the shared kitchen space, you said that you would just have like a general commercial policy to cover that.
Yep. If
So,
you're gonna,
and then Deja, you said you worked out of 2 different spaces, your home and then another space. How does your policy, you carry the same policy or you carry 2 separate policies?
So that one policy is going to cover me like no matter where I go. So if I fly over to the farmer's market or if I'm at my home or at my other location, we have like full coverage for that one policy.
And
Yeah,
that's
so
your
on her
general liability?
no, she
Is
has a
that correct?
BOP.
Or your,
I have the
Yeah,
BOP.
business owner policy. And so within the business owner policy, the liability section she has, that's a commercial general liability policy. It works the same way, but you can buy just the liability policy separately too. If that makes sense. So, but with her, because we're covering some property, her business property at both locations, we have a business owner policy package, and so that way, and then with that package, if she ever gets a building, we just add the building on. We don't need to write a new policy. So,
Just similar to like if you were to move out of like if you're doing all of your baking out of your home and then you move to a separate address, you don't need to, write a new policy if you already have that business policy. You just have to switch the addresses on it.
Yep.
We also have another one coming in. I think it's just like a general statement. Wedding venues are now requiring to be additional insured on policies. And that, again, similar to like, if you were to move or anything like that. I know when I did Valley Junction, they had to be put on the deck page. So, I mean, it's pretty simple too, because your insurance agent can do it. And then based off of whom you're working with, you can either get that form that day and say, here, this is, that venue is now on your policy, or it'll take sometimes a couple days just to give you guys a heads up if you ever need to do this for a wedding or things like that. Make sure you do it sooner than later, because sometimes just processing in general, even though it is on there and we have done it like today, sometimes insurance agents, it'll take them like a few days for it to physically show up just because things are all, automated in the computers. Just again, to sum up what I just said, just if you need to put on a venue on your insurance, do it sooner than later, because it'll usually take a few days to process. Let's see what else we have. Can you touch on key employee insurance and work comp as well?
gotcha. So key employee insurance, you're talking about like a life insurance policy to cover a key employee, or that's kind of the ones I'm familiar with. And then work comp, that's,
She said, yeah.
yeah. So if you, So for instance, because Deja's got her insurance license and she's extremely critical of my Allstate agency. If something were to happen to her, we could write a key man insurance on her life insurance. So that way it would cover my expenses to hire a new office manager, for instance. I mean, I personally haven't dealt with many of them, but I'm aware of several instances that, somebody that's really key. That's, I guess in baking, I don't know. I mean, maybe there would be, trying to imagine a situation where you need that, but yeah, there's definitely things that can be written like that through life insurance. And then workers' comp, that's going to be based off your payroll and so since you're, let's say, a new business, I went through this when I started my insurance agency. There's what's called your experience rating and your experience mod. There's two factors that influence that, and you get put into the standard rate being a new business because you don't have any experience, and it's based off your payroll and the type of work that's being done. So for instance, insurance agents are one of the safest things you can do. So I hardly pay any workers' comp insurance, but they ask, what jobs people do and then the payroll associated with it. And that's my workers' comp premium. The same thing with bakery. If you have, let's say, servers versus bakers, depending on how large you are, if you have an establishment, that's what's going to be your workers' comp rates. And they're going to be, I think in Iowa, they're going to be the same no matter what company you use for the state of Iowa. Excuse me. But if you have a claim, that's where you get that experience rating, makes your rates go up. And then it's a certain amount of period before they go back down. And so that's why, and I know maybe with this group, this isn't as pertinent of a topic, but larger situations, we have more employees. It really saves you money to not have any work comp claims. Because if you do, your rates go up substantially because it's all off your payroll.
And then we have a couple other questions. I'm just gonna keep on workers' comp, and then I'll go back to the mother-daughter question. Can they have work comp if they are the only employee? Example, they get hurt home baking. Can they file on themselves?
No, you can't file on yourself. So I can't file workers' comp on myself. So no, it's just for employees. You got to pay it on yourself, I think, but I don't think you can't file it on yourself from what I know.
And then we're just going to go back. So back to the key employee insurance. The example she's giving is if it's a mother-daughter team and then the mother is aging, how would you, I guess, cover?
I don't know. That is because the problem with life insurance, the older you are, the more expensive it is. So it depends on the age. It might not be worth it. To be quite honest with you, the premium might be so high. The best time to buy it's when they're young, when people are younger. But that would, it's just like buying a life insurance policy. It's going to be rated off of age and health, and then the amount of coverage that you need if something were to happen to. And insurance companies are going to want to see that, what's the insurable interest there? What is the God forbid, what's going to happen and what kind of economic impact you're going to have. They're just going to want to substantiate the amount of level of insurance that you need to buy. Nothing major, but that's just the process.
And then we have a couple other questions coming in. Somebody had asked, what insurance do they use if they get hurt and can't run a business? And then the personal disability policy, somebody's replying, is what you need to cover lost income if you can't work as the business owner.
So that we don't, I don't deal with any of that disability policies. I have a great person here in Des Moines that does, but that's outside my
practice,
my scope.
Any other questions from anyone?
Do you guys want to touch on like technology, since a lot of us work off our computers, and like I don't know if that's covered under
Sure.
the equipment or
so there's actually a separate one just for like electronics and things like that. Let me just see. So the deck page document we would have sent you should have it on there.
Yeah, it's got covers for computers as well as the bigger one, and I know it's not probably as applicable in the business y'all are in, but cybersecurity is is, and it's usually on most of these packages now I've seen from different companies, because that's a coverage that nobody thought they'd have to use. And I know
Yeah.
several different companies that have had to use it where they get hacked, and I mean, I'm sure you might not have a lot of client information, but I know like an attorney office that it happened to that I wrote business on, and then they were so glad they had the coverage on there because they had to pay for, I forgot what the claim was on, but it was, cybersecurity is a big one nowadays, but you're talking more like your computers, if something happens, damage to the actual property. Chelsea.
Sorry, I stepped away. I was putting something in the oven.
Oh,
Let's do both. One, making sure that your actual like computers are insured, since most of us run our computers, our businesses off of our computers. And two, most, from my understanding, insurance companies are now requiring that the data protection be included in their policies. Like I think in my policy, it wasn't an option anymore. It was just like, hey, you have to pay for this.
Right.
So just talking about that, because that was news to me. It's like a federal law or something. But if you
Sure.
want to touch on both, I know we have about 5 minutes left, so
Yeah.
I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. But if other people have other questions, they can jump in too. So
No, for sure.
no,
So
yeah, you're right.
that
Yeah.
kind of goes back to the whole, when you're dealing with a good insurance company, essentially like these bundled packages, like it's going to already be on there and things like that. And then we also have a few other things right here. It said, I remind that policies don't cover COVID or viruses. There was a lot of questions about this last year when their businesses were shut down.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think they're still figuring that out on, because they're like, for instance, Deja's policy does have business income interruption for civil authority orders. So, and to be honest with you, I haven't been impacted by it, so I haven't really followed up on what is going on with claims on that situation.
And then we can just jump real quick to the actual coverage of the computer.
So yeah, the computers, we have that in Deja's, because of and I'll go back to the difference in policy. The business owner policy, like Deja has, that provides for business personal property, which is include her computers, include any other desks or anything else that she has to run her business. If you have just a CGL policy, that commercial general liability, that doesn't provide coverage for business property. That is purely for just a liability policy, so that therefore, if you run your business on your computer and you just have a CGL, there's no coverage for that computer. So it has to be covered under a BOP. And like I said, a lot of times it may not be worth it just from the premium standpoint. It's when you get to a threshold of a certain amount of real business property where it makes more sense to write the whole package. But that's just a discussion you need to have with your insurance agent, how much property you have, computers and ovens, or just whatever materials you're using to run your business, how much is the value there?
And then just to simplify that, the CGL policy is only liability. And then the BOP, as we call it, BOP, for business owner policy, that's going to be like more of like a coverall kind of insurance where, you're going to get the coverage for not only liability, but then for your assets with the computers, the ovens, the mixers, like everything else in between. Do we have any other questions at all?
I didn't see any come in unless they went directly to you, Deja.
Okay, I don't.
I know insurance.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
No, it's okay. I know insurance is like there's just so many, similar to like licensing, like there's so many gray areas and so many caveats, and it can get complicated between a liability and a BOP. And so can you guys, I know we'll have if you want to drop your emails in, if people want to, ask a few questions directly, that would be helpful. I know just like talking to another baker about how they got this covered or something is so helpful sometimes.
Sure.
And
No,
since
absolutely. And we'll actually just send you a text of we'll send you the agency number, which I can never remember. But what you can do is you can actually text us right on our, did I spell that right?
Yes.
You can actually text us right from here. You'll get one of those like generic, like, please reply with one for whatever, just to give us consent to text you. But once you do that, we're more than happy to kind of give you a shout, just being able to, let you know about anything. And then I know texting is sometimes easier for people that way. If you do have bread coming out of the oven or something like that, you're not like stuck on the phone with us and like burning your hands or whatever it may be. So yeah, you can definitely reach us there at any time, really.
I know I have one more question, and we didn't ever say this, and I know that policy price varies, but can you give maybe a range of like what a basic liability policy would be per year up to like covering something like a BOP? And again, I know it varies on like the person, but that was just helpful for me to know early on of like what to budget for per month.
So we started off with the insurance that is just kind of added on your homeowners. And then of course, based off of what your homeowners is, what did we say, like 30?
Off the top of my head, yeah, I think the endorsement's like
Around
$30 to
$36
$32 for the whole year
for the
for
whole
business,
year.
Additional business pursuits.
That's to add on to your actual home policy. Then we have the separate one, which is just for liability, which probably runs around, what was it, $300?
$300 seems to be the minimum premium for any of the companies I deal
Sure.
with for a CGL, commercial general liability. And then a BOP like Deja has, which I think we've got like 30,000 in coverage for business property in both locations. It's only about $724 for the year.
For the whole year. Yeah.
And that's the enhanced that's that stretch package through Hartford that has all those extra coverages. So it's so if you look at the actual coverage, you look at the value, it's a good buy, but if depends on how much you're doing. I mean, $700 could be a large percentage of your gross receipts. It just depends. But yeah, that and that's where I run into with folks that are wanting to do. I think I have a quote to do for a good client of mine that has a bead business, does beads, and she's going to do some trade shows this fall. And, and I said, it's going to run about $300 because she needs the insurance, obviously, to be able to go. And she's like, geez, I hardly do that in gross receipts at one of these. I said, I understand. I do. And so that's kind of the tough part is to stomach just
kind of like a little push pull as far as like, what you can afford at the time. But I will say, like, adding something onto your homeowners at first, that's probably what most people are going to want to do for starting something.
The problem with that, though, it's not going to suffice these events venues that are requiring insurance.
Assuming if they're only picking up from the house.
Yes.
Yeah.